Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser. And for today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest. I have on JR Reich. He has been a musician for many years. He plays all kinds of instruments, the guitar, the bass, the drums. I'm not entirely sure what instrument he doesn't play, but he'll tell us in this episode. JR, welcome in. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Better now that we're here, getting a
Yes.
chance to do this interview. And I know that you've been playing music for a long time, and it's just great to have you on to tell your story because you are a very active musician.
Well, yeah. This is what I do for a living. So yeah, the mortgage and everything like that comes into play. So have to keep the bills going. But mainly, I guess it started way back many years ago. My mom and dad had a band since before I was born, so I was basically raised in a musical house, and they would always rehearse in their living room. So from coming, being raised up like that, and they have pictures of me in the baby crib holding a pair of drumsticks, beating the crap out of everything I can hit a drumstick with, playing along with them. And that was basically the, musical household that I grew up in. I was born and raised sort of in Cambridge, Ohio. And in '83, we had moved to Beaumont, Texas. And I was 7 years old then. My mom and dad, again, had a band. They would always play Friday and Saturday night in the bar rooms back then. Friday night, they went and played. I stayed next door with the babysitter, and my dad they come home about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Just fired the bass player the Friday night. My dad woke me up, showed me a song on the bass guitar. Put your fingers here, now put them here, now move here to move this, and he passed out. So he had quite a few Budweisers that night.
Clearly.
Yes. And so the next morning I had gotten up early, and that same album, I had taught myself how to play that album, A and B side both. So, and my dad was kind of surprised. So he took me with them that Saturday night to play bass in their band. And I had been playing music ever since then. Started out on bass, which was great for me because I learned the fundamentals of the instruments, downbeats, things like that, the basics of music. My dad was a guitar player, so I had picked up guitar along the way. And my mom played drums, so naturally I learned some drum basics from her. And let's see what else. In the meantime, my dad was always a recording fanatic. So he had always tinkered with recording stuff here and there. And we had a little makeshift studio in the kitchen. And that's where I kind of got into the love of recording also.
What were you listening to back then, music wise?
Traditional country. It was all country and Western music, strictly. My mom and dad, they would not listen to anything else but and rock and roll, pop, nothing, no way, shape, or form. But anyway, so yeah, that's what we were listening to. A lot of Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, what else? Willie Nelson.
I think you were.
My
I
dad
think you
was,
were telling me too about a Waylon Jennings record that you have when you were younger, and it was very well loved. So you must have really
yeah.
been really enjoying those records back then.
Yes, I still have that album. The album is Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Jesse Coulter, and Tom Paul Glazier, the Outlaws album. And I still have that. I don't think it's playable today because not only for me learning how to play that, but it's had a few spills of beer and alcohol all over it too. So it's a little sticky. It sounds disgusting, but it's the way of life. And it still has cigarette smoke smell to the cardboard
Wow,
cover.
wow, that really adds to
Yeah.
its it's value, it's sentimental value. So
Oh yeah, that's where it all started for me.
that's
So
great. That's awesome, man. At what point did you get to Florida?
we moved from Beaumont, Texas. We moved from there to Florida in 1986, and at that time, my mom and I came to Florida first, and then shortly after, my dad came after he got everything packed up in the house and all that. How you got to get rid of stuff when you move because you don't want to take it with you, all that kind of stuff. So he followed shortly behind and then started up a band again, and it just continued playing music. We set up a little studio again in here in Ocala, and then slowly progressed as we went along and recorded. Messed around with recording. We had gotten a piece of equipment here, another piece of equipment there. Excuse me. A friend of ours that we met here in Ocala, Bobby Land, had a recording studio on 40. So and he was getting out of it. So we had piece by piece gotten a lot of the equipment that he had. So our recordings got a little bit better, or so we thought. So we had more toys to play with. So but also doing that and playing music, picking up, learning more on the guitar, playing drums. And I did learn at an early age that being able to play drums, bass, and guitar, I was able to get more work than most people. So, and those were the three main instruments that everybody needed. Hey, I need a bass player. Hey, I need a drummer. Yeah, I can handle
That's
that. No
true.
problem.
Those are the two.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I'm still doing that today. I still get phone calls. Hey, can you fill in for me Saturday night? My bass player's sick. Yeah, sure, I could do that. No problem. So,
Were people around town finding out about this studio that you and your dad put together? Were other people perhaps wanting to check it out or maybe record or anything like that going on at that time?
at that point, it was primarily just for our own personal use. We had recorded some other people, but it was more like friends. Um, and we had recorded another musician that we come along. He had his little band. He wanted to do a couple tunes, so he would come over. And I think what my dad wound up working out a deal with was they came over and handed my dad a case of Budweiser. My dad went and sat and had the Budweiser while I did the work in the studio and recorded. But yeah, it was a learning experience.
Right.
By doing that, I was able to learn how to work with other people and pick up little tips and tricks from everybody. And just, my wife says, kind of like a sponge. I just soaked it all up and use it to my advantage, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you are in that period where you're learning, right? And you're trying to grow those skills. Were you at all taking classes in school at that time to learn more about playing music?
Uh, Not about playing music. Basically, learn music on stage. And I also, as far as recording, we had moved, let's see, I think it was 89. We had moved from uh, Ocala, momentary memory lapse there, moved from Ocala to Dunellen, which is where at that time, that friend of ours, Bobby Land, he had started a course at CFCC for recording audio engineering. So I had signed up for that, and I did take a 6-month course for that. So I learned a lot there about the basics of recording, some things that I already had, but just a different way to use the gear. And that's where it started to elaborate more. I started getting more people coming out because the studio got a little bit bigger, and we were able to do more for recording. And then the word, like I say, the word started getting out more and more about recording and different things like that.
Yeah. Were you at all at this point learning about local music? That was there anyone you were hanging out with, or maybe that your parents knew that were playing music on a more local level at that point?
Yeah, I guess you could say that, because we would go to a friend's house for like a Saturday afternoon to hang out on the river or something like that, and somebody else would be there and they would have a guitar, so we would kind of it'd be kind of like musician networking, like what used to be. Not to do with social media or Facebook or anything, but that's how we met other people back then, was through barbecues or meeting up at a music store or something. That's how we used to do it in the old days.
So, at what point did you discover your first band that was from Florida?
Oh, wow. Um, well, it was in the middle of that, but like I say, my mom and dad had their band. And then when my mom and dad divorced, so it was just him and I for a while, and I got into, I guess you call a house band. And we played the same bar every Friday and Saturday night, which got a little old, but it was cool for me because I got out of the house. And I started obviously meeting more and more people. I had never thought to myself about starting my own band because I had always been in a band. I've been playing with, somebody else. Um, as far as starting my own group, um, I guess that would be when the singer of the band I was in, she had left, and we needed somebody else. So the guy in the band found another female singer. They come out to the house, and we went over a bunch of stuff, and to get the keys and everything, and that was our second generation of that group. But again,
Was
meeting
there a
more
name?
people.
Was there a name of that band?
Oh gosh, that would have been Southwind,
Okay.
Southwind Band, uh, and that was the lady that come out to get the keys and arrangements for that song. Later became my wife. Typical country song there.
Yeah, I would say
but
so.
uh, so I guess in a way that's where it started out for me, with my first group, because after about a year or two with this guy, we found out he was kind of skimming off the top, and it we weren't very happy about that. So my wife, who was not my wife then, said, "What are we going to do? This is not fair." And I had said, "Well, let's do it on our own." So we went and we got background tracks. We played the background tracks back then, and that's when hardly anybody was doing it. So we had the background tracks on cassette tapes, and this was the mid had to be, see, 94, 95 ish, and we went out and did it on our own. And I guess you could say that would be personally my first band that I was kind of in control of.
Yeah.
But and still recording at the same time, still doing that in the meantime. And
You mentioned about the cassette tapes, right? So
yeah,
were you putting this out to sell at gigs? Like what were these tapes for?
those tapes that we were using, they were 5-minute tapes. If anybody's familiar with cassette tapes, you had 30-minute, 45-minute, 90-minute tapes, but these were only 5 minutes. So it's one song per side. And we were using those for our background tracks. Like these days, people use their iPads or their phones or something for their background music to perform with.
Right.
We were doing it with cassette tapes, and that's what these tapes were for. So, and we used the 5-minute tapes because if you put 5 songs on one tape, it's harder to cue them up that way. So it's just one song per tape per side.
Okay. So how many songs did you have at that time?
Oh gosh, we had 300 tapes, so that would be 600 songs.
Wow. I imagine a lot of these were cover songs.
They all were, yes, yeah.
Okay.
They range from. I think I was getting into Hendrix, and we ranged from Hendrix to Frank Sinatra, and everything in between. We had a wide variety of music back then.
I imagine that because that's so different than maybe what you grew up with, right? I mean, you went from more like outlaw country to like Hendrix, for example. So, how did your family feel about your pivot to maybe more rock and roll kind of stuff?
Um, my dad kind of, I don't want to say he was upset with it, because he was a straight country guy, but in a way he also realized that whatever I learned to play kind of accelerated my learning, my playing ability. So they weren't really upset with it. They just, well, okay, if that's what you want to do, then go for it, kind of thing. I will say a funny story. When I was in high school, uh, I was getting into the hair metal scene, that kind of rock and roll stuff, which that was a no-no. But I come home one day from school, and I had a Def Leppard. I think it was Hysteria. Anyway, it was on MTV. That's when MTV was really hot, and that's all
Yeah,
they played was music videos when it was really MTV
right.
back then. But I was listening to Def Leppard, and right in the middle of the song, I think it was "Pour Some Sugar on Me," if I remember right. My dad come in from work. He says, "What in the hell is that?" I said, "Oh, this is one of the newer rock bands, Def Leppard." He says, "That's exactly what it sounds like." But I liked it. It was something different for me.
Yeah.
I got to say, though, that probably the first rock band that took me out of the country scene that really, I guess, knocked me out, if you want to explain it that way, was probably Van Halen, when Sammy Hagar joined them. When I saw Van Halen live without a net, I watched it probably half a dozen times that day, and that's what really opened up my world to, oh, there's more than just country out here. I still love country, don't get me wrong, but
Right.
the world is huge. And the music world is huge, and then my mind just blew up with information.
Sure. It's like a whole nother world, right?
Oh yeah.
But they
Oh
kind
yeah.
of can blend together, and there's a place for all of it, I feel like, in
Yes.
someone's taste of music. I want to go back a little bit to the whole cassette thing because a quick story. When I first discovered who you were, I found a cassette, but it wasn't any of those backing tape cassettes because those obviously weren't off for sale, but it was something different. And I stumbled upon a tape, and I'm going to share that here for those that are watching the episode. You can see the picture of the tape. This is a cassette from Darlene and JR, not this JR. Obviously, he's a little older,
Right.
but another JR. And this is a cassette called The Song That I Remember. And it came out in 1994. It was recorded in Ocala. And one of the credits on the tape is an engineer and a bass guitar from JR Reich. This
Right.
JR Reich. So
Mhm.
you had to have been pretty young when you were involved with the making of this tape, which, by the way, this is a pretty good tape. I really enjoy it. So talk about your memories of this cassette and the recording of this album.
Well, JR was he owned a Gulf station, gas station. If anybody's old enough to remember Gulf gas stations back then, but he owned the Gulf service station, and my dad worked for him as a mechanic. So, and of course, my dad was always open ears for any musicians. So, make a long story short, JR had come out to the studio, said, "I want to record a gospel album." And with my partner, says, "Okay." So he came out, both of them came out, and they both had 12 strings. Uh, and I asked him, "How do you want to do this?" He says, "Well, when we play at home, We just sit on the floor and play to each other's. Okay, well, set up like you normally do, and I set up mics and everything. So when I got a decent sound, through the studio monitors, I asked them if they were ready, and they says, yeah. So I hit the tape machine. There were no computers in these days again. It was pure tape machine. And I hit the tape machine and give them the cue that they were rolling, and they performed the songs just like you hear on the recording. Then after that was done, I went back and kind of, I won't say processed, but kind of sweetened the sound a little bit. The bass that you hear on that was from a keyboard. I wanted to mimic an upright bass, but that was a keyboard, which was an old Sonic Mirage sound sampler, which had if you remember, the 3.5 floppy hard disk that they had back then.
Of course, yes.
That's what these sounds were on. And
wow.
So I played that bass on a keyboard, which was from the sound module off of that floppy disk.
Studio magic, my friend.
Yes, yes. And so when they got done with that, we listened to it, and he was happy, she was happy, and I mixed it down on a master cassette tape, and they sent it off to the distributor, and they made the J cards, and they printed on the cassettes and shrink wrapped them like the one you have there. And that's the recording. And yes, I was pretty young. If I had to guess, it's 20. I had to be 15, 16-ish.
Wow.
Somewhere in there. And so, yeah, it was, I was doing that stuff at a fairly early age.
Did you feel like that they really trusted you, or was there any hesitancy to a 15, 16-year-old putting this all together?
I didn't even think about it. I mean, at this point, I had been messing with recording. Like I say, I started playing when I was 7. So by this time, I had been doing it at least 7, 8 years. It was just something that we did. You didn't even think about, oh my God, can I handle this? Am I good enough to do it? That never crossed my mind. It was just another thing that we did at my dad's, at the house, So yeah, that never crossed my mind, and I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Ever.
How did your dad react to the final output of that album?
He liked it. He didn't have anything to do with it, but he liked it. He had a habit of, we would go in the studio and shut the door, and he'd be in the living room watching Andy Griffith with a case of Budweiser. And when it was done, he'd come back and listen to it, and that was pretty much it. But so, but yeah, that's how that was done. And it's funny you should bring that up, because I just got in contact with JR again. He lives a little bit south of here in Oxford for me, and we had been talking about that album. He was asking me if I could remaster it and to put it on like a digital platform or something. So I'm in the process of actually working on that.
Yeah.
That's just wild that you bring that up.
That is wild. That is wild. And that's great to hear, because, albums like this, unless you actually have a physical copy like this, there's no way to find it. I mean, it's not on any streaming platforms. It's really nowhere to be found. And unless you were a part of it, or maybe you remember it from way back when, you wouldn't even know it existed. So it's just, it's nice to know that that's something that could be in the works. And I imagine you'll do a fabulous job on the remaster if that does come to fruition too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it's amazing with modern technology, all the tools that we have on the computers and everything to do this. Because if I didn't have the computer technology nowadays, I wouldn't be able to do anything with it, because the master tape was on an 8-track reel-to-reel, an 8-channel reel-to-reel machine, and it's not playable. The tape is basically almost shreds when you go to play it. So to get it off the original format, it's not possible now. But I can put the cassette, I can play the cassette into the computer, and through a little bit of modern technology magic, it'll enhance it and make it sound better.
Yeah. and I'm sure that'll be great. So, but I definitely enjoy the production on this. I
Thank you.
definitely enjoy that tape. And so I want to also talk about, because you mentioned, you were not only playing music, right, but you were also were checking out some local music as well. And you being young, right, were there places you can go that were all ages, or how were you able to kind of check out some of the different local music that you wanted to before you were old enough to get into some of those other places?
No, there weren't many places I could go into. Matter of fact, when I wasn't no long when I wasn't playing with my mom and dad's group anymore, they got divorced and my dad wasn't playing anymore. I started playing in this other band. We had to get a sheet of paper that was notarized saying that he was responsible for me because some of these places kids couldn't go into, and I was still underage.
Right.
But I was able to again meet other people, and I had because I mean I couldn't go up to the bar and order a drink at 14 years old, so I had sat in the booth on the breaks and listened to what they played on the jukebox. And listening to that, I would always, still to this day, I'll listen to music and pick up on different things and try to mimic what they're doing on the guitar or the drums or the bass, just learn as I listen. But yeah, listen to the jukebox and stuff like that. That's how I learned, and my musical, I guess, taste has expanded because yeah, there were no clubs that allowed somebody at my age to go into them where these other groups were playing.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you remember the first actual concert you went to in Florida?
In Florida, um, I would have to say in Florida would have been to see Charlie Daniels band at the Marion County Fair. But my first concert was actually to see Alabama up when we lived in Ohio. That would have been Jamboree in the Hills in West Virginia. And I guess in a way I was kind of hooked back then. But I did notice when I saw Charlie Daniels that I was paying attention more to what the band was doing. I was watching Charlie Daniels because obviously it's Charlie Daniels, but I was watching the bass player or watching the guitar player or drummer, what they were doing. And I I tend to drive a couple of my friends crazy because I watch the unnoticeable things, the little things, you know. Hey, did you see what that drummer just did? Well, no, I was watching the singer. Watch what the drummer does. Oh, who cares about the drummer? We're watching the singer. So I noticed the, I guess, obscure stuff, if you want to call it that.
Right.
So, and that's how I learn all of this. I watch because, okay, what's the drummer doing on this part? And that's how I, still to this day, I picked that up. And I guess that's how I got to this point in life as far as as being a musician.
I would say, I mean, you obviously picked it up and you've been doing okay for yourself, uh, playing music. So because those were two of your earliest memories of seeing live music on that level, Charlie Daniels bands in Alabama, did you at any point start to maybe do a cover of any of their music in some of your music that you were doing?
Well, the funny thing is I was not singing at this point. I didn't start singing until I was way too shy to sing. So I didn't start singing until I was maybe 19, 20. So yeah, there was what I would do is pick up guitar licks, learn to play the drums along with their cassette tapes and albums and stuff. But and I was not writing songs at this point. I was just basically playing whatever the band wanted to play. I was just, I guess if I look back on it, I was a hired gun and played what they wanted to play.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much it.
How did you overcome the feeling of not being sure if you wanted to sing?
Well, I was told I had to.
Who told
I
you
was told
that?
I had to because the way that come about was when my wife, who was not my wife at the time, But when she had joined the band, she told me, she says, I can't sing 4 hours straight. You're gonna have to learn to sing a little bit. I thought, and I just kind of swallowed that lump in my throat, and I did one song out, and that became 2 songs, and that became 8 songs, and now they can't shut me up because I sing all night long now.
You would never
But
know that from the way you perform. You would never know that's
yeah,
what the starting point looked like.
oh yeah. Well, the first song that I actually sang in public was at my in-laws' house. I mean, we weren't married yet, but we rehearsed in their living room, and I literally sang the first song facing the wall because I couldn't look at anybody. But
What was the song?
it was Memphis, Tennessee. It was the Johnny Rivers tune. But that was the first song I sang in public. And it's probably a good thing we were playing for some backwoods, like kind of dingy bars. Let's just say the first place that I sang at would have been a place out in the middle of the woods. And there were probably 10 people in there, and 5 of them were passed out on the floor.
That's perfect.
It was a good place to start.
Can't get a better start than that. So
No, we were just knocking them dead.
that's
Oh,
fantastic. So once you realize, and those that were around you, that okay, JR can sing, right? He's got a pretty good voice. At what point did you believe that that was the way that it really was?
as far as me singing vocally,
Yeah.
um, well, honestly, I still don't think that because I was the reason I think that way is because it goes back to when we lived in Texas. I had just started learning to play guitar, uh, and I was feeling pretty sure of myself. I think I was either 8 or pretty close to 9 years old then, and I got to thinking, oh, I'm a guitar player playing in a bar where nobody else my age, they're all at home sleeping. I'm up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I got to be pretty good. And I got to feeling pretty confident and sure of myself. Um, and then one night, this guy came in and talked to my dad. He says, "Hey, can I set it on guitar?" Well, this guy, he had no thumbs to start with. He just had 4 fingers on each hand, and
Wow.
his right arm, he had no forearm, meaning his wrist was on his elbow, and he was born that way. And he was asking my dad to set it on guitar, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, okay, yeah, this I gotta see. Well, he grabbed my guitar, sat down, he turned it upside down, the same guitar, just played it left-handed, and he just ripped, tore it up. And from that point on, I knew, even at 9 years old, I knew that I need to change the way I think, because if you start thinking you're really good, there's somebody going to come in the door and basically hand you your rear end. There's somebody always better. So I never thought that I was I still I don't think I'm a great singer, but I can get the job done. That's about as far as it goes. But if, you know, am I a great singer? No,
Yes.
because there's other people that can sing their way around me all day long. So, and but yeah, that's because of that. That's the way I feel today.
Right.
But I can get the job done.
You're not doing too shabby, JR.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, I appreciate that, but yeah, I'm just, like I say, I'm just blessed that I get to do what I love to do, and people enjoy hearing it. That's all I can ask for.
yeah. And it's a good mix. I think your voice, if I had to kind of give my own opinion, I find that your voice is perfect for when you are playing more blues style music. So we talked about how you got into the countryside and how you got into a little bit of the hair metal side.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but how did the blues enter your palette of musical taste?
Well, my wife's best friend had she was a big blues fan, huge blues fan. And when my wife and I got together and I met her best friend Joanne, she was constantly trying to get me in the blues. And it's okay, yeah, that's fine, that's cool. And I never really thought about it too hard. But one birthday we were playing a show somewhere, and for my birthday, she had given me a CD of BB King's greatest hits. And the first song, I took it home, went in the studio, I put it on. First song on that CD was "The Thrill Is Gone" by BB King, and I was hooked. The way he played the guitar, the way he sang, like, oh, I was hooked. I needed to hear everything. I wanted to hear more. And so I worked at Lowe's in Ocala at that time, and every morning I had BB King blasting on the way to work. And when I got done, I had BB King blasting when I left there. The people that I worked with, they got tired of hearing BB King day in and day out because I just fell in love with it. I mean, it was totally different than, obviously different than country and different than hair metal. But so one of the guys says, you need to go across the street, buy some Stevie Ray Vaughan. Well, okay. So I walked across the street on my lunch break to Circuit City when they still had those. You could buy albums there. And I bought Stevie Ray Vaughan's The Sky is Crying album. I put that on, and I wound up a huge Stevie Ray fan. And I bought every album that he had recorded. And then after I got to listening to all of Stevie Ray's catalog, I started realizing that a lot of his stuff was cover tunes. Like he covered a few Hendrix tunes, a BB King song or two. So I started diving into where he learned a lot of the blues stuff, dating back to Elmore James, Albert King, uh, just all these great blues players. So I dug back further into the 40s and 50s and 60s blues music, and
Yeah.
that's where that came from. And the more I listened to it, the more I appreciated it. And then came into Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, the Stones, and then it just kept going. And it's crazy. My record collection is crazy now.
That's fantastic. I mean, it sounds like, when you take that leap into that other genre of blues, that's a deep, deep dive because, like you said, it can go back as early as I think even like the 1920s or the
Yeah.
1930s. Like, hey, they didn't go way back. So another band that I can hear in your music when you're playing more blues is ZZ Top. Are you a ZZ Top fan?
Yes. Yes. Always have been. Um, and I was always amazed by how Billy Gibbons would get such a in your face guitar sound, but yet play so little. Just hang on to one note. And that always amazed me. By this time, when I got into ZZ Top, I was dissecting music left and right in my head. But and it always I always found it fascinating how just three guys, can make so much music. And I realized that's kind of what I want to do. I want to play the blues rock stuff. I want to play the Stevie Ray stuff. I want to play the country stuff. I want to that, and then that's kind of where we're at today because our band now plays all this stuff. And also,
Is that Snake Eyes?
yes, yes. Uh,
Do you say it like
oh.
Snake Eyes?
No, but the DJ on the Villages radio, when they announce us on the squares, he does that, and we chuckle every time we hear it.
I mean, it does have two S's, so
Yes. Well, the reason the name came about was when we first when my wife and I were doing the duo thing, we decided to get into the band. So she learned to play the bass, which wasn't overnight. She didn't know how to play an instrument at all. But we had come across, while she was learning, we had come across this husband and wife that she played a little bass and he played drums. I thought, perfect. So about 2 or 3 months into this, they wanted to play. They didn't care what we sounded like. So that didn't work out because we knew we needed to rehearse more. It just sounded horrible. So
Yeah.
they left.
You got to put in the work.
Yeah, they left. Somehow we stumbled across another husband and wife, drummer, bass player. Like, oh, well, this is a sign of the times or something. That went on for a little bit longer, but that didn't work. So we wound up, by this time, I think we were 2 years in. My wife had managed to play, she got enough songs down to play a gig. So she was a bass player. I was a front man guitar player, and we found a drummer. And as a blues rock country rock and roll band, my wife loved Dusty Hill, the bass player for ZZ Top, because he was always so solid. His bass lines were really solid and right in the pocket. And that's kind of who she mimics when she plays. Well, we're also a three-piece, so she's the rhythm section. So as far as, it's funny you mentioned ZZ Top, because that's kind of how we base our sound off of. Try to keep it full.
Interesting.
But and yeah, and well, the drummer we had then lasted 3 years. He he wound up getting a DUI or two on a golf cart, losing his license, and
that's very Florida, JR.
Yeah, you could say that. Matter of fact, in this area, that's very true. It happens a lot. But so make a long story short, we wound up getting another drummer who had a driver's license and a car. But and this drummer has been with us going on 17 years now, and it's just always been the three of us. And we like the three of us mainly because we don't have to charge the venues as much. If we had 5 or 6 pieces, we'd have to charge more. And the venues tend to like that. And we have, the more people in the band, the more personalities you have to work with, if that makes sense. Because if somebody's having a bad day, then it'll rub off with somebody else.
It's like
a lot more hassle.
it's like another marriage.
It is exactly like that.
Yeah.
So the three of us get along very well. Obviously 2 of us do. But yeah, and he's been with us for 17 years now, and we're still going, and
that's great.
No thoughts or anything of quitting or changing it up.
Yeah. And then, you think about some of the various shows you played over the years, right? So thinking back to some of them, any favorite places that you think back fondly, maybe even still play there, but there could be some places too, as we all know, the changing of the time, some places don't survive. Right. So are there any places that you think back on that you just had fond memories of playing at?
Well, all the gigs are fun, and we like playing all of them because we find that most of the people that come and see us are fans. A lot of our fans have become friends, but they all are very supportive, and that's who we enjoy playing for our friends and fans anyway. But I've done some shows for openings of some national acts, I guess, if you want to call it that, in big theaters and stuff like that. I think the largest crowd I played for to date was right at 3,800, which doesn't sound like a lot until you see 3,800 people in one place.
That's a big number. Yeah. Who was that with?
That would have been opening a show with Kitty Wells and Johnny Reich, which, if anybody's familiar, she's known as the Queen of Country Music. Super nice people. It was a great night. And they just reminded you like you were at their house for Thanksgiving dinner. They're super. It was a great show. But
do you remember how you got that slot to play and open up?
Actually, yes. The guy that my wife and I played with, that was skimming money, he had the contact. So we put the group together, and he was the reason we got that job. And I was on guitar, maybe 14, 13, 14, because I wasn't driving yet. So 13, 14, I was on guitar. My dad was playing rhythm guitar. They had a drummer, I don't remember his name. The fella that we were in the band with played the keyboards, more like piano. And we had a couple other guys that I don't remember who they were. And the singer at the time was a lady called Celeste Schaefer. And she did a great job. She was a great singer, super nice back then. We had a lot of fun, but that show really stands out in my mind. When they opened that curtain, I just froze for about the first 5 seconds. I mean, I'm used to playing in bars with 30 to 40 people in them, and then there's 3,800 people sitting there staring at you, going with that look, entertain me now.
Were you doing a lot of like a mix of covers and originals? Like what was the set list like?
There was a lot of covers, and Celeste had 2 original tunes out that she recorded in Nashville, so we did those. And I think we only had, I think it was a 45-minute slot to open for the main act. And so, yeah, we did mostly covers, and there was a couple of original tunes in there. So, yeah, it was a mixture.
And because Ssnakeeyez is in basically, in the Ocala area, generally speaking, right? So there are other cities that are not too far away. You have like, Gainesville, Orlando, that sort of thing. So do you ever play gigs in those other towns and cities and what have you, and maybe travel more throughout Florida?
We have. We don't much anymore, but we have. When we first started Ssnakeeyez, we hit the scene pretty hard. We had a camper. Our equipment was in a trailer, so yeah, it would be. We played as far north, maybe a little bit further north than Gainesville, all the way down to St. Pete and coast to coast. So yeah, we played all over the place. Most of the venues were nice enough. We would play for Friday and Saturday nights, and they would allow us to sit in the parking lot or behind the venue and hook up to water and electric with our camper and stay there overnight. You know, if we drove from here to St. Pete, I mean, that's a little, maybe an hour and a half away. So they said, yeah, sure, bring the camper down. We'll set you up. It was a lot of fun. Didn't make much more money doing that, but it was a lot of fun. And we still get people come up to us to this date that says, well, I remember seeing you in 2001. You were playing at such and such a bar. And it's, oh my God, yes, I remember that. That was a wild time.
I was going to ask, from your recollection, was there a certain standout gig that you had that just had some of the best crowd vibe going on? Anything come to mind?
One of the most challenging and interesting gigs that we always talk about was we were playing in Palatka for I think it was Daytona Bike Week, but we got asked to play at a bar in Palatka. I think it's called Cheyenne Saloon. We took the camper up because they wanted us to play Friday night and Saturday night. Well, we took the camper up and set up, and it was an outdoor stage. So we played Friday night. I think we wound up playing for 5 hours, a little bit longer than we were originally supposed to. We tore everything down, went in the camper, went to sleep. We got a knock on the door at 9 o'clock Saturday morning. I know you guys aren't supposed to start till 5 o'clock, but can you go ahead and set up and start playing now? And they said, we'll be happy to pay you whatever. Well, okay, sure. So we set up, I think we started at 11 o'clock. By the time we got all the equipment set up and checked and everything, we started at 11 o'clock, and I think we played till 9 o'clock that night. And we realized, I think it was the second set, the crowd was awesome. I mean, there had to be, if I had to make a guess, maybe 400 or 500 bikes there. It was great. But we decided to test ourselves, excuse me, and see if we could do that night without repeating a song. So we played, I don't know, what is it, 9 hours, 10 hours, something like that. And we didn't repeat a song. We might not have done the song right, but we didn't repeat the song.
It's a long
And
time.
yes, it was. The craziest moment of that night was somebody dared us to play Freebird. Sure, fine, why not? So we started into playing Freebird. Now, mind you, this is just three-piece, bass, drums, and guitar. And I was doing my best to cover three guitar parts. So we got halfway through the song, and as we got into the fast part of Freebird, these bikes just started rolling in. There must have been 200 bikes that just drove right in front of the stage for the whole time we were rocking out. It was the coolest thing, and we still talk about that to this day. And they were the nicest people, the fun, the crowd. It was just a great night all around, a great weekend.
Anybody capture that at all in video form?
Somebody did, but where it is, I have no idea. We've seen the video, but I can't remember where it's at. We might have it on a computer off of a VHS tape or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was definitely a fun night.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too, I mean, that's the perfect song to really bring people together. Plus also too, I know most people typically wouldn't, because Skinnerd was like, I mean, legendary band, right? So
Oh yeah.
but from Florida, right? So I mean from Jacksonville. So you can't go wrong with Freebird though.
Yeah. But we did another thing we do is there's a place here in the villages called City Fire that every year they have a Woodstock day. They all dress up in Woodstock clothes. It's a Woodstock themed day. And the owners just got this place. This was quite a few years ago, but they had just got this place. And I forget where we were at the time, but I was doing a Jimi Hendrix tune. I was doing Voodoo Child. And at the end of Voodoo Child, my arrangement, I do the kind of like the Woodstock version of it with the Star Spangled Banner and everything. I do the behind the head and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So they were there. And at the end of that, they had come up to me and says, look, we do this Woodstock day. We would love for you to come and play for it, because they saw the Hendrix thing. So sure, we'd love to. And we've done every one of those every year. I think it's going on like 9 years now that we've done that. But yeah, the Jimi Hendrix thing I do, people ask for it all the time, but I tell them, look, if I do it all the time, it won't be a special thing because everybody will get tired of seeing it. So every once in a while, I'll do the Hendrix tribute thing and with the Star Spangled Banner and the squealing and all that kind of stuff. But I do that and kind of my own arrangement of it. There's a couple, 2 or 3 videos on YouTube of me doing it years ago. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
That I've seen. I did check that out. And I mean, the playing, JR, I mean, it's pretty solid. I mean, so are there any other songs or anything else in your repertoire that you feel like really gets people excited, and maybe something similar that they request that you play?
We do. Well, one of them is ZZ Top. We've kind of over the years we've got into this thing where we morph 2 songs into one. Like we do Tush and LaGrange. That's one song. We do some CCR stuff. That's 2 into 1 song. Make a real long song. But the ZZ Top, LaGrange, and Tush, that's always a crowd pleaser. They always ask for it by name now. Purple Rain is another one that I do that has a real elaborate ending to it.
And that's quite different than some of the other music we've been talking about so far. So do you dabble into more of that style of music?
Well, yeah, I've always liked Prince, but I never thought about, us playing, covering his stuff. And in a way it's sad, but I'd never thought about doing that song until I had heard that he passed. Then all of a sudden I said, hey, let's see if we could do Purple Rain. But you know, it's in a way it's kind of sad when something like that happens. You know, you think it takes something like that for you to think of that. But yeah, I've always been a fan of, you know, like Prince, Michael Jackson's another one. But there's some tunes that we do that people kind of look at us in the beginning and scratch their heads like, how's this going to turn out? Really? And like we do we do a version of Some Kind of Wonderful by Grand Funk, and we morph that into The Way You Make Me Feel by Michael Jackson. And when we start into that, people kind of they do kind of a whiplash turn, like, what? Wait, what? What are you doing now? How? That's not possible.
It is a bit of a U-turn.
Yes, yes. And I'll do stuff like we do another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd, and to which I do I have a megaphone, and the middle of that song where he's kind of yelling from the helicopter, I'll go over with the megaphone and do that through the PA, and the people just eat it up. They love it.
That's very theatric, you know. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, we're for three people, we're constantly trying to figure out something different that's a little bit out of the norm that other bands don't necessarily do. Not saying we're better than any other band, but just something that's a little different. And so honestly, we were at a thrift store, and I saw this megaphone sitting in a bin. And I thought, you know what? I think I have a use for this. And sure enough, the first night I tried it, the people just went crazy. And it was cool. It sounded really cool. But yeah, that's how we got a lot of work, from being versatile and being able to cover these tunes like that. And a lot of the people that come and see us, they would ask us. We always ask for requests because we want to play what they hear. That's what keeps them coming back. So if we don't know it, we would jot it down and we would learn it for the next time we were at that venue. We see that person, hey, we learned your song, so here we go. And we're up to, if I had to guess, we'd probably, in our catalog of songs that Ssnakeeyez covers, is probably 1,800 tunes now. It's just crazy. I mean, we may not remember perfectly, but we can cover them.
It's a lot of songs to have in the catalog, but you know, I think, you know, the covers are what people may be most familiar with. However, I'm a big fan of the original songs that I've heard. There could be more out there. I imagine there was a CD released at some point. Is that true?
Yeah, we actually have two CDs. The first one was released with our first drummer. I believe it's called Ssnakeeyez, and it has a picture of my wife on the front. Those are original songs. And later on, after we got our new drummer, that we released another album, and that's called Shed and Skin. My wife is feeding me my memory titles here. But that one's called Shed and Skin, and we released that one. That one I remember, that was in 2012, if I remember right. But those are originals also.
Where were these albums recorded?
The first one was in the studio that we have. I have my studio now is the second one, but the first one I had here was a smaller one, and we recorded that there on an 8-track analog machine. And the second one, believe it or not, at that time I was in between studios. Excuse me, but so we had a portable multi-track machine, and we had set up in my mother-in-law's barn and recorded that live in her barn. So we call it the barn session.
Yeah, that's fitting.
But it worked. So we did a CD, our first CD release party that we actually did. We did it at a place called McCall's Tavern here in the Villages, and the place was packed. I think it was a good thing that the fire chief didn't walk in, because he would have flipped. There were too many people in that place, and
How
It
many
was so
people would
packed.
how many people would you say were there?
Um, I guess in that little bitty club, there had to be 150, 175,
Wow.
and it may be 200, but we took our first break and we could not get off the stage to go to the bathroom. There, it was just that packed. And it was the wait staff and everybody just looked at us, the deer in the headlights. You got to be crazy, because they couldn't get through to give people their drinks and food. So and then we got, I would say out of that night, we probably sold 100, 125 copies that one night.
Wow.
So it was, I mean, it's not like superstar status where, hey, we sold, we went 1 million, but for local band like we are, it was a pretty great night.
So is Snake Eyes at all working on any new material that you perhaps could be putting out?
Right at this moment, we have a handful of songs that we haven't done a whole lot with, but I find that now, because of COVID, I started doing some solo gigs too. And I'm still, along with the band, when everything got back to normal after COVID, the band started picking up. But in order to keep working, I'd done some solo shows. And at this point, I'm doing the band gig and the solo at the same time. So I've had a few people ask for a solo release. So as soon as I finish up with a couple of projects I have in the studio for other people, I am going to put together a solo album of original stuff. And I've got a few ready to go on there, and it should be a pretty quick because it's just me and acoustic guitar. So it, I do have a couple on uh, what do you call them? The digital platforms. I have a couple of songs that are there. I know it's on iTunes. I just heard it today on Spotify or Amazon Music. I didn't realize it was on there. Her daughter got us an Alexa for Christmas, so we just hooked that up, and it was shuffling music this morning, and up pops my song. Like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. There are two songs that I have heard fairly recently. I think they're on YouTube, This Thing and Hello Sister. Are those fairly new?
That's
Are those
yeah,
new
those
songs?
the right. Well, yeah, within the last couple years. Well, geez, no, I take it back now. Time has gotten away from me. This is 2024. Hello Sister, I wrote back in 2018. And I think if I remember right, this thing I wrote during COVID. Because it's, even though it sounds kind of like an upbeat song, it's Johnny Cash flair to it, but it's actually a song that talks about depression. And there's a lot of people, I know a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but during COVID, there was a lot of people that were going through that. So this idea popped into my head during the COVID session, I guess you call it. And I wrote that song. But yeah, they're relatively new, but not brand new.
As you're writing music, how much of what's going on around you, whether it be personal stuff, current events, that sort of thing, how much of that goes into your own songwriting?
Well, a lot. Um, this thing actually came about. I had just heard another one of my musical heroes, Marty Stewart. I had just heard a song that he uh, had out, and I just heard it for the first time. It wasn't a new song, but I heard in an interview where he had written this song with Johnny Cash, and they played the song on the radio interview, and because of that song, I was influenced. That influenced my writing of this thing, because it kind of has that same flair, but it's talking about a different subject. But yeah, that influenced the songwriting in that song a lot. Um, as far as Hello Sister, that is actually a true story about my sister and myself. And we had just got reacquainted back in 2018. And I never considered myself much of a songwriter. So coming home from work one day, coming up the driveway, this idea popped into my head. So I came in, got settled down. I told my wife, I got to go out in the studio real quick. I got this song idea. I got to write it down and get as much of it down as I can. So I went out in the studio, and 15 minutes later, this song was done. I had just wrote it and kind of recorded it on my iPhone real quick just so I'd remember it. I came back in and played it for my wife. I said, "What do you think?" She said, "It sounds great. It talks about exactly how you two, grew up." And so then later on, as time went by, I went back in the studio and recorded it the right way. And that's the version that's out there now.
It's a beautiful song.
So, thank you. It's a true story. And the odd thing is that, again, that's another subject, that nobody ever talks about anymore. Excuse me. But I play the song out from time to time, and just about every single time somebody will come up to me and say, "That's an amazing song, and I know exactly how you feel because my brother and I, or my sister and I, we haven't talked in 30 years. And for the first time last week, we just had a 2-hour conversation on the phone." And they always share their story about that. But it's something that's hardly ever talked about. And what made me write the song, I really don't know. It's probably because of what we were bringing back to the surface, her and I getting reacquainted. But yeah, I'm kind of, if I have to say I was proud of that song, I am. And
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of songs that people get connected to. They have their own story of, and that to me is what music's for anyway. Make you feel happy, sad, great. You just get married, you got a song for it. Somebody
Right.
passes away, you got a song for it.
Right. And speaking of family, another song that I saw on YouTube was written by your dad, Dear Mr. President. Do you do a lot of songs from that maybe were written from your dad that you kind of squeeze in here and there that maybe
I do have a handful of his that I do. That one I actually started doing a few years ago, and but I listened to him when he originally recorded it back in the 70s. Um, and there was only 2 verses to it. And I'm listening to it, like, there's more to this story. So I had written the 3rd verse to that. And he had passed away almost 2 years ago now, but he heard the song and he loved it. And I do play it out at my solo gigs once in a while. And I've noticed they get a mixed reaction on it. Because one, they're sitting there, either they sit there and think of what I just sang, and the ideas are tossing in their head about how they feel about it, or I'll always get the one guy hollering out, "That's a great song. That's exactly how we feel," that kind of thing. But yeah, I've got a handful of his tunes that I'll dig out, and actually, I've got. After he passed, I was going through some of his stuff in his studio. I found a brown spiral notebook of a bunch of songs that he never recorded. So I'm also going through there and seeing if I could put a tune to some of these tunes to possibly make something like that on my solo album.
what's the feeling that goes through you when you stumble upon something like that maybe you didn't know existed and you see that and you uncover some of those songs that your dad had written?
Um, well, it's I guess in a way it's kind of mixed, but not really. But the best way I guess I can explain it is that again, he's always been in the music. I've always known him in the music, and it's just something else. It's like finding a lost record or something. And I'll listen to it, and I guess being as I'm older, I read these songs and listen to them in a different way than I would have 20 years ago. But I'm just mainly because, like I say, I don't personally have a bunch of songs that I've written. and he was a great songwriter, a great entertainer. Uh, and I guess if I have to explain it, it's kind of like cheating. It's like, hey, he wrote this song, I'm going to do it. So, but yeah, I'll listen to them, and then I'll think about the story and the storyline, and if they're a different, if it's a different type of song, then I'll elaborate on it and record it or something like that. But
Right.
so yeah, it's some of them are a little bit different. There were a couple of them that I read that I thought, nah, I'm not going to be able to get through this one. Let's go to the next one.
Is that because it is how it made you feel, like more like a sad situation?
Yeah, there was one, and he had written one before I was born, actually. It's called Tribute to a Little Giant. That's one song that I could never do because he wrote it talking about me before I was born. And he had mentioned to me one time, he said, well, change the words and make it about your son. I said, no, I can't do that. And then it's not right. Can't do that. So I said, there's just some songs you got to leave alone. Just leave them the way they are.
It's interesting though to hear that story, that he was able to share that with you, and that he had written that before you were born. And at least you got a chance to read that and see. Did he ever record that song at all?
Yeah, that one's actually recorded. It was on. He recorded it with his band. It was pressed on records, 45s, and I've got copies of it. And yeah, it's been recorded, published. It was out there in the public back in the 70s.
Wow.
My uncle on my mom's side was a radio disc jockey up in Cambridge, Ohio, and he would, from time to time, he would play some of my dad's records up there on the radio. So he still got he has my dad had a BMI publishing license, and he could always tell how many of his songs my uncle would play on the radio by the $3.47 check he would get every 6 months for BMI.
That's how you know it's still a thing.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I also wanted to ask you too, real quick, JR. When you are playing some of these gigs, right? Obviously, there's a lot of hustle involved. You having to promote yourself and the things that you have going on. But over the years, have there been any local publications of any kind that have helped maybe to spread the word of what you've been doing and maybe the bands you've been playing in? Anything like that you can recall?
Well, outside of the venues, making up posters and flyers, stuff like that. Because when we hit the scene real hard, there was no social media, so it was all pretty much legwork, so to speak. The only thing I could think of that I remember that made a drastic change was we have a friend or two that are they're radio disc jockeys. So every once in a while, we would hear them announce the local bands that are playing, were in the local venues. They would advertise on the radio, and the newspaper used to have a whole page, and that page used to be called Go Clubbing, and they would list all the nightclubs and all the bar rooms, and they would list where all the bands were playing, and we would see our name in there about every weekend. And that's about it for back in those days. But nowadays it's all Facebook and social media, that they put it on Facebook.
Was that like a local Ocala paper?
It was Ocala Star Banner. Yes.
Okay, Star
Yep.
Banner.
Yep. Yeah, we still have some of those clippings. We years ago when you had stuff like that, you make a photo album, and for the kids nowadays, those are where you kept pictures. It's not like you kept your photos in a cloud or anything.
Right. Right. A physical scrapbook.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I know a software.
But yeah, our my wife was just telling me that the second Ssnakeeyez album, Shedding Skin, our son at the time was 3 years old. And if anybody has a copy of this CD, as soon as you put the CD in, our son does a count, 1, 2, 3, 4, then the music starts. And then you listen to the album all the way through. at the very end of the album, the song dies out, and about 3 seconds later, you hear him on there saying, "That's a wrap. Thank you." And the CD's over with. But
How old was he?
3 years old. He was
Wow.
three then.
Sounds like he may have beaten you because you didn't. You had a little bit of a later start. So
yeah.
wow.
He's not playing yet. He'll be 15 next month. He's not playing yet, but we're working on it. I keep telling him, look, hey, you can go out and for a few hours a night, make a couple $100. You know, it's not that hard. But it hasn't sunk in yet. But maybe when he's 15 or 16, you know, when he gets a little older and realizes how much gas money costs for his car, maybe that'll help.
If he decided that he wanted to play music, is there a fourth slot available in Ssnakeeyez?
We'll figure something out.
Good answer. Good
We'll
answer.
make him a sound man or something. But yeah, my wife says she may be retired by then. But
okay.
But yeah, we'll figure something out, or I'll just run sound for his band.
There you go. There you go. And also, just real quick about Ssnakeeyez, because there really isn't a lot of music you can find digitally. Is there any possibility of getting some of that stuff out there, whether it be on Spotify or on iTunes or even on like a Bandcamp or something like that?
I do. I do need to get some of that out there, and I have a bunch of friends who are on me about it. You know, hey, you need to put something out there. You need to put something out there. And a lot of our family members are the same way. I need to do that, but what I need, the thing is I need to upload the CD into the computer in the studio to be able to release them as a single. Then you can, you know, I could do that. I need to remaster them so they sound a little bit better for today's musical society. But yeah, that has been talked about. I just need to get in there and get off my lazy rear end and do it.
You're very busy, and I know also with a lot of people we tend to move forward and not go back a whole lot. So,
Right.
but certainly it would be nice for, as you've heard from others, to be able to listen to those songs or just be able to, you know, for those that may not have experienced those songs and see the band and go on and start looking up Ssnakeeyez. Oh, cool! I found some songs.
Right.
And they're not covers; they're originals, and
Right.
I imagine pretty good originals. At least from the ones I've heard, I liked every one of them. So.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you. But yeah, I'm going to be working on that soon.
All
My
right.
wife says, yeah, she wrote them too. I mean, my wife and I both wrote the songs on that second album. So yeah, I'll get on that pretty shortly here.
There you go. All right. Well, you're recorded, so we'll hold you to it. So there you go. So
All right.
Awesome stuff, JR. It's been a pleasure having you on. And thanks to your wife Donna for helping fill in some of the gaps. I know, you know, it's hard to remember every little detail, so it's nice to be able to get that as well. And it's just been a pleasure having you on to tell your story. As we kind of get ready to close things out, I'm going to turn it over to you. Any final thoughts to close out the interview? The floor is yours.
Well, yeah, if you want to, I would say to anybody out there that wants to play for a living, just at the risk of sounding like an old shoe company, just do it. Don't worry about what anybody thinks. There will be people that'll say no. Don't worry about it, because the more people that say no, there's going to be somebody that says yes. And before you go, from a musician's point of view, don't go out and get a band and expect 500 people to show up at your gig. You have to play the 5-person barroom gigs before you get the 500-seat venues. And just be true to yourself. That's what you can do in the end. And also, I say this at the end of every gig: be safe and be true. Be kind to fellow man and just help each other out and take care of each other. In the end, that's what we got anyway. So, yeah, just if you got the dream, no matter what it is, just do it. Don't worry about it. Just do it. Just, and hang in there, because it's going to be a rough ride. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But that's it. I appreciate you having me here.